So I'm just going to repeat that. Our sister Kamila is the co-president of and faculty member of the University of Sufism, and she holds a doctorate in computer science and molecular biology. And she worked for 20 years at the National Institute of Health in Bethesda, Maryland, where she was honored for her contribution to the Cancer Genome Anatomy Project. Kamila is a grad student of the University of Spiritual Healing and Sufism. She's a licensed practitioner of Oriental medicine and a former faculty and member and a clinic director of the Maryland Institute of Traditional Chinese Medicine. Kamila's steadfast service for the face of Allah inspires her to continually strive for a deeper understanding of the subtle divine realities. She spurs us towards excellence with her beautiful example of surrendering to Allah, her clear intelligence, and her yearning for Allah. A quick announcement. Kamila will be teaching a brand new class that begins March 3rd called The Soul of Sufism that will be offered via Zoom format. And in The Soul of Sufism, Kamila will join Dr. Ibrahim Jaffe and Salim Adelstein to teach about the Sufi path and the 28 stations. For details, please go to the website of www.drjaffemd.com. And tonight, our sister Kamila teaches about reliance and tawakkul. And welcome, Kamila, and we are very delighted and excited to have you here. So please start.
Thank you, Rashida. Let me just begin with the Fatiha. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim. Waladallin. Ameen. 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 So thank you all for joining me this evening. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm going to be teaching from the book by Sidi Muhammad al-Jamal titled How the Arrival is Realized, O People of Hearts and Souls and Intellects. And this book is fondly known by those of us who find that quite a mouthful as simply the Arrival book. And I'll be teaching on the chapter on reliance, which begins on page 175 of this book. Reliance Tawakkul is the name of the chapter. But I have a copy of it in PDF form. So what I'm going to do is share my screen so that I can put it up on the screen for those of you who would like to read along with me as I talk about this, this topic. Okay, so you should all be looking at the first page of this chapter. So I'd like to begin, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the Merciful and the Compassionate. Sidi has a quote here on the left page. Rabbana alayka tawakkalna wa ilayka anabna wa ilaykil masir. Our Lord, on you we depend, to you we turn, and to you is the final homecoming. So I wanted to, before I begin, just, what's the word? I'd like to begin by a disclaimer so that I don't want you to all become depressed and begin to feel hopeless as I describe this chapter on Tawakkul that's written by Sidi, because This book titled The Arrival Book is a book written about reaching Fana, the station of Fana, annihilation in God, reaching unity, and reaching the stations of Baka. So it's often also called colloquially the Fana Baka book. But this chapter on reliance, just so you know, is the third chapter from the end of the book. So as you can imagine, this is a topic which is very high. Complete reliance is a very high station and is not reached completely until we've reached the beginning of the stations of unity. So don't become discouraged as you hear the description of perfect reliance on Allah if you find that you have not yet reached all of the states that C.D.'s describing here, because it's a work in progress and we're all walking towards this station. And it's also not an all or nothing thing. So it's not either you're nowhere or you're there. You know, we progress as we walk through the stations and become more and more reliant upon Allah in different parts of our lives as we reach the higher stations. So I just wanted to give that disclaimer before we begin, just to encourage you to hang in there, because this is definitely possible to arrive at, but it, you know, it takes time and it's a high station. So if we look at the first page, page 175, C.D., as he so often does when he writes, I love the way that he writes. When he starts a chapter, he often just gives you the bottom line in the very first phrase or the very first sentence. And he's done that here in this chapter. What C.D.'s written is, Tawakkul is an action of the heart. And that really says a lot about the station. It's telling us it's not about what you say, it's not about what you do, and you actually can't fake it. And C.D. goes on to say this explicitly, meaning it is not an utterance of the tongue, nor is it an act of the limbs. So it's not about what we say or about what we do, nor is it in the realm of knowledge and comprehension. So it's not about our mind and our thoughts or our reasoning capacity or the amount of knowledge that we have about the Sufi path. This is actually a station of the heart only. It's an action of the heart. Now, C.D. then goes on to say some Sufis classify it among knowledge and gnosis and say it refers to the heart's knowledge of the Lord sufficing the slave. So what he's saying here is, we're having some background noise. Perhaps there might be some people who need to mute for the time being. Some classify it among knowledge and gnosis. So Gnostic knowledge is maharifa, the heart's knowledge of Allah and the heart's knowledge of creation and the actions and the meanings of Allah. And this Gnostic knowledge does not begin to start flowing into our heart. Could Rashida or somebody, could you look and see if...
Karen,
Yeah.
Could you please mute yourself?
I am muted.
No, you're not, because
Really?
I can hear you, honey.
It says mute. Wait, let me try again.
Yes, now you're muted. Perfect. Thank you, sweetie.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Some Sufis do say that it is encompassed in knowledge, but they're speaking about Gnostic knowledge, the maharifa, which is the heart's knowledge, and it's the knowledge that's placed in the heart directly by Allah. And this maharifa begins to arrive in our heart towards the end of the third station. It begins to come in, and then it comes in more completely when we reach station 4, which is the first station of completion. So station 3 is the station of the soul and the world of Jabarut, the world of the divine names or the qualities. And station 4 is the station of the witnessing of Allah's essence. So this is, C.D. says about station 4, this is the first station of completion. And completion continues until you all the way through to station 7. So this Gnostic knowledge does not begin to come in, as I said, till you've almost reached station 4. But this is why some Sufis say that reliance is encompassed in under Gnostic knowledge. So, as C.D. says, reliance is an action of the heart. It is to cast the heart between the hands of Allah, so that it is like the dead body in the hands of the washer of the dead, turning it as he pleases. Now, ultimately, all of our hearts are under Allah's command and under Allah's control. C.D. has said to us in the book, The Reality of Imagination, that our heart is always under the control of one or more of the qualities of Allah, of Allah's divine names. So from the spiritual perspective, our heart is always in the hands of Allah, turning as Allah pleases. But C.D. speaking here about us willingly placing our heart in Allah's hands and allowing and asking Allah to do with our heart as he pleases. And he goes on to say in the second paragraph, and it's the abandonment of self-choice and volition. This is what makes it a willing choice, that we place our heart in Allah's hands and to flow with the divine decrees and with what Allah wills. And then the next phrase actually is really a very critical concept. And C.D. says, and to be content with what is destined. So ultimately, if you are completely reliant upon Allah and trust completely in Allah, then it follows that you would be content with whatever Allah has made for you. Whatever the outcome of any event is, you would be content with it, knowing that Allah has chosen what is best for you. So if you find that something happens and you're not content with the outcome, then you're actually not reliant upon Allah. Because if you truly rely upon Allah, you know that Allah's power is greater than yours, Allah's knowledge is greater than yours, and Allah's wisdom is greater than yours. And so whatever Allah makes, you will be content. So this contentment is a sign of reliance, and it's also the gift of reliance, that when we're in that station of complete reliance upon Allah, our heart is at peace and we're content. And that's a beautiful state to be in. So C.D. goes on to say, and it is to trust in Allah and be at peace with him and find repose in him. And it is that you are not roused to dependence on secondary causes, despite the severity of your need for them. And just in case there's anyone on the call who's not certain what C.D. means by secondary cause, the primary cause of everything that we encounter in this world is Allah. So the primary cause, for example, of your provision in this world is Allah, because at the time of your birth, Allah decrees what your provision in this world will be. And so the prime mover of what happens in this world and the prime cause is always Allah. And then secondary causes would be, for example, if you went out and got a job so that you would have money to buy food. That's, in this world, seemingly the cause of how you feed yourself, right? You get a job, or your partner has a job or your parents have a job, and they earn money, and then they buy food, and then you can eat it. But nonetheless, the primary cause of that is Allah's decree. And so secondary causes, when C.D. talks about secondary causes, he's talking about everything that we do ourselves in the world to bring things about, or things that other people do in the world to bring things about for us. And so he's saying that true reliance in Allah means that you're not really depending on secondary causes, despite how much you apparently need them. Because, you know, many of us have found ourselves really in need of a way of earning a living, or really in need of healing, for example. If we're sick or a family member is sick, you know, we really feel the need for healing. We need perhaps medicine and healers to help us return to health, or we need a job to earn money to pay our mortgage or to pay our rent. So we can certainly find ourselves in situations where we seemingly are really dependent upon secondary causes to help us make our way in the world. But in the state of reliance, your heart is not attached to these secondary causes. Your heart is firmly attached to Allah and is peaceful and content in the knowledge that you're in Allah's hands. And he goes on to say, and it is that in your usage of secondary causes, you do not exit from the reality of finding repose only in the real, and attachment to him in every state and moment. So C.D.'s saying here, and you know, even as you use the things of this world to gain what you need in the world, in a state of reliance, you don't become attached to these things. You don't become attached to your job and believe that your job, you need your job for safety, for provision. You seek a job when you need provision, but you don't become attached to it and fall into the belief that it's the job that's keeping you safe, or it's the job that's actually providing for you. So I'm going to stop after these first two paragraphs and just see if there are any questions about anything I've read or said right now. I'll stop from time to time as we go through this chapter just to check in and see if there are questions. So if you have a question, please unmute yourself and speak up. Or is there another way that you would like them to ask questions, Alima? By raising their hand, or you can also, I guess, type in the chat box.
Yes.
I can't see the chat box or anything while I'm sharing the screen. So Alima, if you would, I'm going to rely upon you to let me know if there's a question, or to read it if there's a question in the chat box.
Yes, inshallah, myself and Rashida will be watching for that.
Okay.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
So any questions about these first couple of paragraphs? Okay, not hearing any questions, so I'll continue. Here in paragraph 3, C.D. says, reliance, tawakkul, is to cast the body in acts of servitude and to attach the heart firmly to the Lordship and to be at peace with what suffices. So I just want to draw your attention to, there's this theme that's running through this chapter. And the theme that is running through the chapter is that our body is acting and our heart is at peace. And C.D. returns to this theme over and over. So he introduced it in the first two paragraphs, that reliance is an action of the heart. And what he's saying here is that true reliance is we're at work in the world, we're acting in the world, and particularly acting in the service of Allah. And meanwhile, our heart is at peace and firmly attached to Allah. And that we're at peace with whatever Allah has given us, with what suffices. So if He is given, He is thankful. And if He is denied, He is patient. The people in this station are known as the Sabirin, the patient ones. And Allah has told us in the Quran, and Sidi has written this too, that Allah loves the patient ones. And Allah defines that as those who, when they're given, are thankful, and when they're denied, they are patient. And patience in Sufi terms, sabr, is not just patience the way we think of it in English, it's steadfast patience. So there's a quality of steadfastness with the waiting. It is to undertake the motions of servitude while simultaneously having the heart attached to the planning and management and direction of the Lord. And the heart's stillness and surrender in the flow of the divine destiny and decrees. So as I said, Sidi's speaking about our body being in action and our heart being in stillness and being in peace. In this last chapter on the first page, Sidi gives us an example of perfect tawakkul. And notice that he says reliance upon Allah in its perfect essence. So he's saying in this, he's referring to the station of witnessing the essence and saying the perfect essence of tawakkul is demonstrated by this example. And he says, and he uses the example of the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi wasalam, at the moment when he was thrown from the catapult of Nimrod towards the fire. And as he was being catapulted towards the fire, the Archangel Jibril came to him and asked him if he needed any help. And he said to the Archangel, "As to you, no, I have no need of you." And I've always been struck by this example because I think about what my reaction would be if I was being catapulted towards a fire and Allah's messenger showed up and asked me if I needed any help. My reaction would be, why, yes, I do. Thank you very much. And I would be extremely grateful to Allah for sending the Archangel to help me, and I would accept the help. And it also reminds me of the joke that I'm sure we've all heard about. There's a joke about a man who was a devout believer in God and was caught in a flood on the roof of his house and was in danger of his life, and he was praying and asking Allah for help, and a man came by in a boat and offered to help him from his roof and take him to safety in the boat, and he said, no, Allah will save me. And then a helicopter came, and various people arrived in a helicopter and boats and other forms of transport to save him. And he kept saying, no, Allah will save me. And then he drowned. And when he reached the pearly gates and asked God, why did you not save me? God said, well, I sent you a boat and a helicopter and a jet ski. So that would have been my reaction. So it was very interesting to me when I read this story. I contemplated it, and of course the difference between me and the station of Ibrahim in that moment was that the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi wasalam was in the state of fana, because Sidi says this was because Ibrahim alayhi wasalam was absented from himself by Allah. And this is the station of fana, when you're absented by yourself and are witnessing only Allah. There was no fire, there was no Nimrod, and he did not see any reason for fear. because he was witnessing only Allah. As Sidi says, this was because Ibrahim was absented from himself by Allah, and so he did not see with Allah anything else besides Allah. So he was completely witnessing Allah and not witnessing anything of this world. So my advice to you, if you find yourself in danger and help arrives, if you're noticing the danger and you're noticing the help, you're probably not in the station of fana, and I suggest you accept the help and thank Allah for sending the help. But if you're in the station of fana, there will be no question, because you won't be aware of the danger or of anything other than Allah. And of course, being in that station, Allah took care of the Prophet Abraham, and when he landed in the fire, it turned into a garden. But the other thing I want to point out again is that the station of fana happens in station 4, which is the station of witnessing the essence and the first station of unity. So if you're not in unity, you will not be in this station when you're in a state of need. And so your reliance will not be as complete as Ibrahim's was. So Sidi's giving us an example of perfect reliance here. And Sidi goes on further on in the chapter and elaborates on what he's said in this first page. But I just want to stop again briefly and just see if there are any questions so far. Nobody saying anything? Okay.
In the chat, there is no questions in the chat, but
Okay.
do you have any questions, beloved? No.
Yeah, you're welcome to.
But I think, we have like some new people. Could you like maybe elaborate a little bit about station 4?
Well, station 4, as I said, is one of the first stations of arrival into the unity with the oneness with God. Now, the first 3 stations on the Sufi path are known as the first journey. And in station 1, you are completely witnessing only the world. You're listening to your ego self, you're listening to the voices of darkness, and you're completely focused on the world and not witnessing the divine at all. In station 2, there's some light that has entered your heart, and you're beginning to see what your ego, what the voice of darkness, the guide of darkness is doing, and you're beginning to witness the unseen worlds, the worlds of the angels and the worlds of images, and you're beginning to become aware of the divine worlds and the unseen worlds, but your witnessing is not stable. So sometimes you're witnessing, you're turning and facing and witnessing the spiritual worlds, and sometimes you're turning back to the physical world. Station 3 is the station of the soul, and in station 3, your heart and your witnessing have become more stable, and you're facing the spiritual world, and you're facing Allah, and you're facing your soul, and you're beginning to witness the qualities of the divine as lights, and also their actions in the world. But you're not yet completely witnessing Allah solely. So, but you're on your journey. As I said, towards the end of station 3, the Gnostic knowledge begins to enter your heart. And then station 4 is the station where, at the end of station 3, as you enter station 4, you're now at the beginning of the second journey, and in this state, you're witnessing only Allah and not the physical world. So the Sufi path has 7 stations and it has 3 journeys. And as I said, the first journey is from the world to Allah. And at the beginning of that journey and at the end of that journey, you're witnessing only one thing, either creation or Allah. Then the second journey is station 4, where you're with Allah. And then when you enter stations 5, 6, and 7, you begin to come back into witnessing the world, but you don't lose your witnessing of Allah, of God. And so station 3 is a journey back into the world as Allah's servant, where you're able to witness both God and God's creation. So station 4 is the beginning of that journey of completion, where you're just ending the first journey from the world to Allah and getting ready to start the third journey from Allah back into the world with Allah. Does that clarify, Rashida?
Thank you. It's perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's take a look at the top of page 176 over here. And Sidi says, and the folk of Allah are in agreement that reliance does not contradict or go against the employment and usage of secondary means. So he's saying that being in reliance does not mean that you don't go out and get a job, or that you don't go to the doctor when you're sick, or, you know, that you don't address in this world your needs. So being in reliance does not go against that, because it's an action of the heart and doesn't have any relationship to what you're doing on the outside. Again, we're talking about the heart versus the body. And in fact, reliance is not sound unless you do use secondary means. He says, reliance, tawakkul, is not sound except in using them, because otherwise it is null and false. And the reason that he says this is, he says, indeed, reliance was the state of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the acquisition of livelihood was his transmitted practice, sunnah. This was the Prophet's example, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because the Prophet Muhammad and all of his companions did seek their livelihood in the world. They didn't sit in a corner and wait for manna to fall from heaven. They were not sitting around waiting for Allah to provide what they needed in this world. They went out and they sought their livelihood. So this is the example of the Prophet. So again, there's a dichotomy between the state of our heart and the state of our body. We're to actually use our body to seek our livelihood and meet our needs in this world, and that does not nullify the station of tawakkul, reliance in our heart. This was actually the Prophet's example. And actually, Sheikh Hassan al-Shadili, who was the founder of our particular Sufi order, was a wealthy and well-educated man. And when people came to him and asked to become his student, he would not take as a student anyone who did not have a job. He expected people to be earning their livelihood and working in the world before he would take them as students. Then we have the sentence here that puzzled people when this book first came out. Abu Sa'id al-Haraz said, reliance upon Allah is agitation without stillness, and stillness without agitation. So the first part of the sentence is referring to the body, agitation without stillness, and the second half of the sentence is referring to the heart. The body is agitated and not still, and the heart is still without agitation. So reliance is in 3 gradations. Sidi often does this. He breaks things down into levels and then will describe each level to us, from the beginner's reliance up to the reliance of the Prophet's And he says that the first station of reliance is trust/reliance, called tawakkul. And then the second level of reliance is surrender, taslim, which actually comes from the same root as Islam or salam. And the third level is consignment and assignation, tafweed. So he says, the one who trusts in Allah is at peace with his promise. This is the beginning station. You trust Allah enough to be at peace with what Allah has promised you. And then the one who surrenders is in the second level, taslim, is content with Allah's knowledge. So in that station of reliance, you know that Allah's knowledge is, Allah's knowledge is infinite and yours is not. So you're content in relying upon Allah's knowledge. And the one who assigns his affairs to Allah is satisfied with his wisdom. So the highest level of reliance is that you know that Allah's wisdom is infinite and yours is not. And so you assign your affairs completely to Allah because you're satisfied with the wisdom of Allah, that Allah's wisdom is greater than yours. So reliance is the beginning, surrender is the middle, and consignment is the end. Reliance in Allah is the quality of the believers, the mu'mineen. Surrender is the quality of the saints, and consignment is the quality of those who realize his unity. So consignment is the quality of those who've reached unity, oneness. And as I was mentioning at the beginning of the talk, reliance is a compound state. So it's not an all or nothing thing. You're either not reliant upon Allah or you're completely reliant upon Allah. This is something that builds gradually, and there are a number of things that are required for you to take on as characteristics to make your reliance complete. So he says there's a collection of realities which must be present for reliance to be authentic. And the first of these is Gnostic knowledge of the Lord and his qualities, such as his power. Actually, let's talk about this first statement. The first of these is Gnostic knowledge of the Lord and his qualities. This is why I said it's a very high station, because as I've mentioned, this Gnostic knowledge doesn't begin to come in until you're close to the end of station 3. So you need Gnostic knowledge of the Lord and his qualities, which you begin to understand in station 3, because that's the station of the soul, and you begin to witness Allah's qualities. And such as his power, his being sufficient for every being, and his eternal self-establishment. This is Baka, Allah's eternal self-establishment and the establishment of others through his establishment. And to trace all affairs back to the source in his knowledge, Alim, and Gnostic recognition of their issuance from his will and power. So this Gnostic knowledge is the first step which the slave takes in the station of reliance. And then CD goes on to say, reliance can never be sound and cannot be envisioned from a philosopher. In other words, you can't learn this from books, even though CD is describing it to us in a book. It's a station of the heart, it's not a station of the mind. And so it can't be envisioned through learning, or from one who says that anything that can occur in Allah's kingdom could be what he did not will, or anyone who denies that everything that happens in creation is Allah's will or has been allowed by Allah. nor is it authentic in one who dismisses or denies the attributes of Allah. For those who do, their reliance is not acknowledged or accepted. Okay, so that's the first requirement, is that you have Gnostic knowledge of Allah and His qualities. Any questions before I go on?
Nothing on the chat, so.
Yeah, very quiet.
Assalamu alaikum, beloved. I
Oh,
have a
go ahead.
question.
Ah,
Sorry.
yeah.
So I was just reflecting upon what you spoke of, that anything that happens by Allah's will or because Allah allows it. And to me, that feels like a very, 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 very high station and difficult to always be in alignment with. Much easier to be in alignment with my own life, you know, and what's happening in my own life, but to look out at the world, at everything that happens everywhere, is can be a little hard on our hearts. I wonder if you could speak to that a little.
Yes, it is hard on our hearts, because creation, first of all, is both this world, this physical world, and the unseen world combined. And Allah's creation is the manifestation of all of the divine names, qualities of Allah. And so is in perfect balance and is in perfection. It can't be otherwise, because this is the manifestation of Allah's attributes and qualities. But our view of the world is very limited, firstly because for most of us we're only seeing what's happening in this physical realm, and we don't see what happens in the unseen. So we're seeing a very small part of creation. And we're also, our view is even more limited than that, because we are one small speck among all of humanity. And so we're only aware of some of what's happening even in this small part of creation. And we also don't, and so our perspective is very limited, and it's affected by, what is painful to our self, to our nafs, to what we think is right. And we also believe it's part of the human nafs that Allah placed in the human nafs the desire to be king of creation. And Allah placed that so that in the human being, so that the human being would become the vice regent on earth and care for creation. I don't think we've done a very good job of it, but that was the purpose. Allah created a vice regent on earth, a human being. And so there is, in all human nafs, we have a tendency towards lordship and thinking that we know how things should be. And so we have our own feelings about what's right and what's wrong, what's good and what's evil, and what's painful and what's enjoyable. And, all of these things limit our perspective in a major way. We're also very limited in time. We don't know the future. We have some memories of the past, but even those are somewhat unreliable, we're learning through science. And so we have a minuscule perspective compared to Allah's perspective. And until you reach this station where you have Gnostic knowledge of Allah, which really means until you're very close to or in at least station 4, you don't have an understanding of Allah's intentions and what Allah is making with some of the things that are difficult for us. And you also don't see how Allah balances out these difficulties that we experience in this physical realm when we move on to the unseen in the next world. So it is hard for us to understand until we reach these stations, these high stations, because you need to be able to get a sense of the meanings of what Allah is making before you can accept it completely when it's something that's difficult and painful. Does that help? Okay, thank you. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, so the first thing we need, as we were just discussing, is we need Gnostic knowledge of Allah and His qualities. We need to begin to understand the nature of Allah and what Allah is making in the world. And then on the next page, CD says, and the second thing that you need, and know that the reliance of the slave cannot be authentic until his realization of unity, Tawheed, is authentic. For the reality of reliance is the heart's realization of unity. So long as there remains inward attachments to other than Allah, then his reliance is defective and unsound. And to the degree that he divests himself of attachments through the realization of unity, that is the degree to which his reliance is sound. For whenever the slave turns to other than Allah, a portion of his heart is removed. He means removed from the state of reliance. His reliance becomes deficient to the same amount as that loss of that portion that's taken away. So this is why I said that, you know, our reliance is not either 0 or 100%. You can be, and you know, this paragraph makes it clear, you can be reliant upon Allah in certain areas of your life and not in others. And so, but, you know, we're not going to become completely reliant on Allah until we reach unity, which, as I said, is a very, very high station. So, you know, have compassion for yourself if you're not in the complete state of reliance, because most of us are not. And we're all walking towards that and working towards that, but we're not there yet. But Alhamdulillah, we've reached certain stages of reliance. So what I would encourage people, encourage you to do actually is to really sit and contemplate where in your life you are reliant upon Allah and where in your life you're really not. And just notice those places within yourself. Don't have any judgment about it. It's not right or wrong. It's just, here's where I am on my journey to complete reliance on God. For me, you know, there are certain things that I think are hard for many people, places where it takes us longer than others to trust Allah with. One of the places that's very hard for many people is, of course, our children, our families, people that we love. And money is another big place where people, a lot of our, or many people's security is based around money. You know, you feel safe if you have enough money to take care of yourself, which of course is a secondary cause, but it's one that we are attached to because we think money brings security. So those are two places, but you know, they're different for each person and they change. I mean, I became aware actually during the financial crash of 2008. I noticed that I was not nearly as panicked about what happened to the economy and to the stock market and my savings and all of those things as I would have been a few years previously. And I was like, huh, that's changed, because I was able to just basically ignore it and not worry about it. Whereas I know that a few years earlier, I really would have been in a state of panic, worried that I was going to lose all my security for my old age. And I'm also aware that, you know, I'm still very attached to my children and have very strong opinions about how their life should be. So, you know, I recommend to you that you just look at the places in your life and say to yourself, okay, here's a place I am reliant on Allah, and here's a place I'm not yet. Alhamdulillah. It's one of the ways we come to know ourselves better. Any questions? Okay, I'm going to move along a little bit. And may
I
I
have
ask,
Alaikum, we have one
Assalamu alaikum.
question.
yeah,
Assalamu alaikum.
alaikum assalam.
Hi. I just wanted to say thank you, Kamila, for just the reminder and kind of putting it into context, the limitations of our perspective in this world. And I just wanted to share, I had a tiny little taste of this. I'm sure there was much more to it than even what I was even beginning to be aware of. But back, several years ago when we had the situation when the children were being taken away from their parents at the border, and I was feeling so upset about this. And it was actually during Ramadan. So one evening when we were doing Taraweeh prayers, and I was kind of holding that in my heart and, feeling my upsetness about it. And then it was just like this kind of this beautiful light came in, or some way that it just like a really got this taste of the depth of Allah's mercy for those families that were affected by that. And so really, and then this is something I have struggled with a lot in my walking, is like trying to make sense of the world and how to be, how to walk with Allah in this world where all these things happen. And so just a reminder about that creation includes the unseen worlds and the divine qualities and everything, and whatever it is that we see or we think we see or whatever is so very limited. That's really helpful.
It is.
But, it was just really, really sweet to just kind of feel the place where I was upset, and then to even just get this little taste, tiny little taste, that there was something more to it than what I could see.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yes. Yeah, that's a little drop of the Maharifa coming in. Yes. For example, I mean, there are so many things that are so merciful that I'm still learning about. I mean, for example, one of the most painful things for a mother is to lose a child. And I was so touched when I learned that that Allah knows this. And when a mother who has lost a child dies and moves to the next world, they're greeted in the next, oh, it's going to make me cry. They're greeted in the next world by that child who takes them by the hand and takes them directly to paradise. So, this is part of what we don't know and we don't understand, is that everything is perfect in Allah's creation, and we can only trust. And this is part of the building of the trust, that, there is this mercy and this perfection and this love and kindness that is there, that we're not able to see from that perspective. We're getting close to time, so I'm going to actually skip over this next paragraph. C.D.'s really reiterating, talking about the fact that our body should be busy with secondary causes while our heart is still in trust with Allah. And he says that, sorry, let me get some water. And he says that, trust in Allah is like having a fortress that we can enter where we're protected from an enemy. And so we're within the fortress and we see the enemy outside, and we're neither afraid of the enemy coming or happy when the enemy leaves, because we're completely safe with Allah. So I wanted to get to this paragraph here. This is, C.D. says, your reliance upon him is founded upon your favorable opinion of him and hope in him. And this makes perfect sense if you think about it. Why would you rely upon somebody that you didn't trust or you didn't have a good opinion of? So that's another thing I would recommend for you to sit and contemplate, is what is your opinion of Allah? How do you feel about Allah? Do you, we all know that we should love Allah, but do you love Allah? Do you trust Allah? Do you have a good opinion of Allah? Or, you know, have you been so hurt that there are places where you distrust Allah or have a bad opinion of Allah? Because, you know, many, from our perspective and from the pain of humanity, you know, there are people who say, you know, why has Allah allowed this to happen? You know, Allah, you know, Allah is not kind and loving and just, because otherwise this would not have happened. So I think it's a helpful practice for us to actually sit and really ask ourselves, what is our opinion of Allah? How do we view Allah? How do we feel about Allah? And you know, what is our connection? So Sidi says, therefore reliance is to have a favorable opinion of Allah. And in reality, one's good opinion of him naturally induces him to rely upon him. So if you would like to be more reliant upon Allah, build your good opinion of Allah. Begin to look at the blessings that you receive. One of the things I realized at some point was, you know, it's not just about looking at what has Allah done for me lately? You know, what are the blessings that Allah has given me? It's also, what are the things that Allah has protected me from? You know, it's actually helpful to sit and think about all of the horrible things that could, well, maybe not, but there are a lot of really horrible, painful things that could have happened to me that haven't happened to me. And those are blessings from Allah as well, because Allah has protected me from all of those things. So it's good to look at that from that perspective, as well as looking at the positive things that you're aware of that Allah has given you as blessings. There's also all of the protection that we receive on a daily basis. So work on building your favorable opinion of Allah and feeling gratitude and seeing all the good that comes from Allah to you. And that will actually help build your reliance. And I'm going to skip down here to this paragraph. Sidi's repeating here in these two paragraphs the nature of reliance, of completely casting your affairs to the hands of Allah willingly, and out of choice and not out of compulsion. And he says, and know that contentment, rida, is the fruit of reliance and the greatest of its benefits. And we spoke about that at the beginning. Because if a person relies upon Allah before the action and is content with the allotment of Allah after the action, then he has accomplished servitude. And Sidi goes on to say that this istikhara prayer that many of us use when trying to make decisions is actually an example of reliance upon Allah. And he says, this is the meaning behind the famous supplication of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam for seeking guidance in one's affairs. This is the istikhara prayer. It's, O Allah, I ask you to show me what is best through your knowledge and bring it to pass through your power, and I ask of you your immense favor. And he says, this is reliance and consignment. Then he says, for you are all powerful and I am not. You know and I do not, and you know of the unseen. And this is the relinquishment of one's knowledge and power and ability to Allah, and entreating him by his qualities of knowledge and power, which to him is the most beloved thing which those who entreat him by. So if you look at this, it's actually speaking about those three levels of reliance that Sidi mentioned earlier. You know, first of all, there's trust in Allah's promise, then there's surrender, and then in Allah's knowledge, and then there's assigning your affairs because of Allah's wisdom and power. Then he requests from his Lord to bring about that affair and to facilitate it for him if he knows it to be better for him in the short and long term. And the short and long term means this world and the next. Because Allah, the journey that we're on is actually the journey of our soul, not the journey of our body. And so Allah is bringing about for us what is best for our soul, not what our nafs necessarily thinks is best. So he says if he knows it to be better for him in the short and long term, or to keep it from him and keep him from it, if he knows it to be harmful for him in the short and long term. So this concerns the need which he requests from him, and there remains nothing but for him to be content with what God decides and decrees for him. Then he, the Prophet ﷺ, said, and bring about the good for me, whatever it may be, and make me pleased with it. And this I find the most touching part of the prayer. It's asking, Allah, make me content with what you have decreed for me. This supplication comprises all of the above-mentioned divine Gnostic knowledge and realities of faith, which include reliance and consignment before the enactment of the decreed matter, and contentment with it after its enactment. This contentment is the fruit of reliance and the proof of its authenticity. For if he is not pleased with what he decrees for him, then his consignment and submission is defective and corrupt. If he truly relied upon Allah, he would have been content with what Allah does with him. One of the Gnostics was asked, when does a man truly rely on Allah? And he answered, when he is content with Allah as a trustee. And this reminds me of one of the famous phrases in Arabic, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil. Allah is sufficient for us and he is the best of trustees. So that's a phrase that can be helpful to work with if you're building, trying to build your reliance. Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil, or Hasbi Allah wa ni'mal wakil. Allah is sufficient for me and he is the best of trustees. So any questions about this chapter before we close? I want to give you a few divine names that I'll give you that are helpful for building trust. But before I do that, are there any questions about anything in this chapter?
Any questions, beloved? I think it was very clear. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah, we could use the qualities that we would maybe practice. I think it would be very helpful.
Okay. So the qualities that I recommend that are helpful for building trust are, there are 4 of them. There's As-Salam, S-A-L-A-A-M, As-Salam, the source of peace and safety. This is a quality that strengthens the soul and enlightens us from the inside, even when it doesn't necessarily show on the outside. It pulls us into the inside, to the inner, and develops the quality of peace inside and the unity inside. So particularly if you're dealing with nervous people, it's helpful to give them this quality. And it gives you the capacity to look at your experiences in life in a trustful way. So it's helpful when those difficult things happen in the world that really hit our hearts and make us question. As-Salam is a quality that will help us to build our trust. The second one is Al-Mu'min, M-U space M-I-N. This is the quality, the bestower of faith. A mu'min is a believer, and there's no danger coming from you to the world anymore if you're a mu'min. The more that you're in the quality of mu'min, the more others can rely upon your help, not only in the spiritual but also in the worldly aspect. And this quality helps to relieve the heart of doubts and fear. And it's very helpful when you're working with deep wounds of the soul. The third quality is Al-Mujib, M-U-J-I-B. This is the quality, the responsive. Allah is the one who responds to us. Allah says, "Call me, I will answer you." This quality, Mujib, develops awareness and concentration of the mind and develops our awareness towards others. And it can help stop the inner dialogue and allow, you know, the inner voices and allow you to see clearly what's there. Sorry, someone asking a question?
Oh, no, just my friend Haniza was asking me how the spelling of Al-Mujib.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I'll type it. I think Sarah's typing. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay.
The quality is on the chat. Thank you.
Al-Mujib, the responsive. You can use it when you want to learn to really listen and to observe what people are telling you or saying. But it's also not only towards people, but towards life. It helps you to listen and hear and gain insight into life. Helps in bringing out your intelligence and your clarity in thinking and feeling. So it helps with emotional and mental clarity. And the last one is Ash-Shakur, the appreciative. That's spelled S-H-A-K-U-R in the transliteration. Ash-Shakur, the appreciative. This brings up, first of all, our awareness that Allah sees all the good that a human being does. So nothing good is lost in this world. And it also reminds us that the good that we do is counted 10 times, while the bad only once. So this quality builds thankfulness to Allah and also thankfulness to other people. Because someone who cannot be thankful to other beings cannot be thankful towards Allah. So you practice your thankfulness towards Allah through your thankfulness towards creation. So I would recommend working with these qualities in order to help you build your trust. The quality of salam, peace and safety, mu'min, belief, mujib, responsiveness, and shakur, gratitude.
Beautiful.
So any last questions or comments from anyone before we say goodnight? Oh, I see the chat here.
I think we still have some time, like about maybe 15 minutes, because we're supposed to finish at 9:30, right?
Oh, okay. I thought it was only now. Okay, good.
It's like we still have time, so it's perfect. Yeah.
Any comments from anyone and any questions? Just unmute yourself and speak up or type into the chat. I actually see the chat now that I'm not sharing my screen.
Perhaps we could work a little bit with a couple of these qualities.
Yes, I have an exercise that we can do with them. I wasn't sure that we would have time, but
we do.
Yeah, I didn't realize we had this much time. Let me find, I have to find it. I actually closed the file that I had them in. Let me, sorry, I'll go back and find it again. There we are.
Yeah.
Okay, so qualities for building trust. We'll begin, and there are some hand movements that we do with these qualities. So I'll show you what the hand positions are, and we can work with recitation of these qualities. So we'll begin with the quality of as-salam, and we're going to place our hand like this. Let me show you, put your left hand in front of your chest like a bowl. It represents the letter Ba, the letter B. And then you put your right hand with your index finger towards the sky. You place it over the bowl. So you have your left hand here like this and your right hand pointed up. And you hold your hand in that position as you recite the quality As-Salam. I suggest that what we do is make sure that everybody's muted, Rashida, so that when people recite it, we won't hear each other, because then we'll throw each other off. So if we just make sure everyone's muted, then I'll go ahead. I'll begin with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Place your hand in the Alif, which is the letter A in Arabic, and the Ba, which is the letter B. The letter Alif represents the unity and the letter Ba represents the multiplicity. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. As-Salam, 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 Assalam, 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 Assalam. Now for the second quality, you place your index fingers pointing to the sky at the level of your ears. Al-Mujib, Al-Mujib, oops, sorry, it's Al-Mu'min, 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 Al-Mu'min. Then for the quality Al-Mujib, you open your palms to the heavens like this, outwards to the side this way. It's a little hard to see. Let me bring it in a little closer, but out like this. Al-Mujib, 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 al-mujib. And then for the final quality, ash-shakur, we place our fingertips like this in front of our heart, pointing up with our index fingers touching. Ash-shakur, 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 ash-shakur. And for those of you who are on Zoom, I have typed in the phrase that I mentioned earlier that's also helpful. It's in the chat, at the bottom of the chat. It's the phrase that's helpful for building trust. Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil. Hasbunallah
wa ni'mal wakil. Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil.
So go ahead and recite this 11 times. You're actually unmuted, Rashida, so you might want to mute yourself just so we don't.
My friend Haniza was asking, how many times do you want us to repeat those 4 qualities?
We're gonna, the qualities? You can do them as many, I did them 100 times each, but you can do them as many as you want, you know. And if there's one in particular that you really feel is helping your heart more, then focus on that one for a time. You can also take one and work on it until you feel as though something shifted and then move to the next one. There's no set way that you have to do it.
Okay, thank you.
But let's recite Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil. We'll recite it 11 times before we close. Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil. 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 Allahu Akbar. So just one last chance if there are any questions. Oh, there's a question from Halima Gibson. Are there hand movements for all the qualities? Not that I'm aware of. There may be, but I don't know them for all the qualities. Any other questions or comments? Anything anyone would like to share before we close?
Assalamu alaikum.
Yes,
Kamila, I just wanted to say thank you for this beautiful teaching. Alhamdulillah. When I was in school, like maybe 2006 or something like that, one of my classes, I think it was Wadud, read this chapter, and it's one I've come back to time and time again, and I haven't been with it for a while, and so I really appreciate you bringing it forward. It's just one that really touches my heart, so I'm grateful for the class tonight. And for all of you who are organizing this call, alhamdulillah.
Yes, thank you to the organizers. It's a wonderful service to the community, this program. Any other questions or anything anyone would like to share?
Assalamu alaikum, Kamila. Just wanted to express gratitude.
Thank you, Halima.
I really loved how you unfolded the tawakkul. It made me kind of recognize and give mercy for the places that have that feeling that they're in tawakkul, but those other places where they may not, and that is part of the process, that you can be in the soul place in one place and in the nafs in another. Astaghfirullah, and it's all okay. And I just really appreciated the time you took explaining it, and having it on the PDF was also really nice to be able to follow along.
Oh, good. I'm glad it was helpful.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all, everyone, for coming. It was a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, Kamila. Thank you. And Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakil is the fourth line in the litany after the wazifa.
Yes.
Yes, it's a very famous phrase. I love it, actually. It really touches my heart.
Can we get a translation for that phrase?
Translation, yeah. Yes.
Translation in that form is, Allah is sufficient for us, and He is the best of trustees. Wakil is the divine name trustee. There's another form where instead of Hasbunallah, it's Hasbiya, Hasbiya, and that simply means Allah is sufficient for me. So it's Hasbiyallah if you're speaking just about yourself, and that's Hasbunallah if you're speaking about collective group. Allah is sufficient for us.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Let's close.
Guys, say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, let's close.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim Siratal ladina an'amta alayhim Ghayril maghdubi alayhim Waladani.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this incredible talk. Good night. I hope to see you again.
Thank you, Kamila.
Good night, everybody.
Assalamu alaikum. Good night.
Good night. Sleep well. Thank you.